And from the African coastline, they would take slaves in that area, which is often why you find similar tribal groups being taken to French colonies or Spanish colonies. Also want you to pay particular attention to the section on lynching here and the issue of lynching here in America that was particularly difficult for African Americans to deal with. I saw an exhibit of lynching that was a travel traveling exhibit, and one of the things that bothered me when I saw it were these postcards. People would make postcards where they would lynch a black citizen, and it would be, like date your sisterburg, Tennessee, and it would have a photo of the latest lynching, and it was always the same, sort of thing. There would be the body hanging, and then there would be, law officers next to the body, and then, sort of men in the community, and then just like, kids and women, like they'd made a picnic of it. And that was particularly frightening when you think about it, because what they were saying at that moment was, we can kill a member of the community and never face retribution. I mean, if I had to use a gun to stop somebody from invading my house, I don't think I would take a picture. I wouldn't take a selfie with the body, because that would look wrong. But they clearly had no fear of retribution. Talking about white ethnic Americans, one of the first groups, believe it or not, to face organized distancing were the Irish. Signs all across the East Coast. No Irish need apply, because the Irish were considered to be sort of this plague. We don't think about folks like Jewish Americans. We don't think about those today, even though actually some of the first gangsters, some of the first organized crime after the Irish were in fact Jewish gangsters. But we don't think about those today. Then it goes on to talk about Asian Americans, largest group being Chinese Americans, next group being Japanese Americans, and paying attention clearly also to the issue of why did we drop the bomb on the Japanese, not the Germans. When we actually uncover that and look into it from declassified documents, it was because we wanted to intimidate the Soviet Union, and it was clear that we didn't value Asian lives like we valued and thought of European lives. Again, we round up Japanese American citizens and put them in internment camps. Those were American citizens. We didn't do that with the Germans or Italians. Korean Americans, fourth largest group, Filipino Americans, which have a dual ethnic heritage in that they're both Hispanic and Asian, because the Spanish settled the Philippines first. There's the issue of Indo-Chinese Americans, often referred to as the boat people. After the close of the Vietnam War, they came in a large grouping that showed the desperation of the times, and they would basically sail out on anything that would float, trying to be caught up by the American fleet, so they would be taken to the United States. Then Asian Indian Americans. They talk about Asian Americans in sports. One that I'd like to point out, there used to be a restaurant called the Sea Dragon over on Peyton Gin here in Austin, and they had a little shrine to a guy named Dat Nguyen, who was one of the first Vietnamese football stars. He was part of the infamous Wrecking Crew at Texas A&M, and then went along to play a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. Hispanic Americans, largest group being Mexican Americans, second largest group being Puerto Rican Americans, and then Cuban Americans. Then they also talk about Middle Eastern Americans, Arab Americans, Persian Americans. Folks from Iran and Iraq often bristle at being referred to as Arab. They don't like that. They consider themselves Persian, a different group. and again, often denotated by the practice of a different religion. So now we start seeing how things like class and race, religion, gender, start to affect people. They actually do affect our lives, even though we've been told, oh, no, you can just do whatever you want and just try hard. The fact is that these things do affect us. The issue of racial issues going into the future, clearly, as white America has felt threatened by a large growing diverse class, they seem to have favored at times candidates that will take them back to yesteryear and make them feel like they're going to be on top again because they feel threatened by a diverse and growing America. And the problem is that that's just going to be how it's going to happen. European Americans just don't have families in a large enough group. There's not enough European immigration to the United States. So we are going to have a very diverse country, whether we like it or not. All right, and that closes out Chapter 9.